pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Burt Lancaster as J.J. Hunsaker, world-famed columnist whose gossip is gospel to 60 million readers. Tony Curtis as Sidney Falco, the kid who had ideas about taking over.
We happen to know I'm your star pupil, because I reflect back to you your own talent.
I'd hate to take a bite of you. You're a cookie full of arsenic.
Don't turn your back on him. You might find a knife in it. This is their story, and that of the big shots and big names who worship the sweet smell of success. Along Broadway, throughout Hollywood, down Wall Street, on Capitol Hill, sweet smell of success.
We're friends, Howie. We go as far back as when you were a fresh kid congressman, don't we?
Why is it that everything you say sounds like a threat?
Maybe it's a mannerism, because I don't threaten. But why furnish your enemies with ammunition? And here you are, out in the open, where any hep person knows that this one is toting that one around for you.
Sidney is a great salesman. He'd sell anything to get there. Just ask his girl.
Sidney, I don't do this sort of thing.
What sort of thing?
This sort of thing.
You need him for a favor, don't you? Well, so do I. I need his column tonight.
All you think about is yourself and your column. You see yourself as some sort of a national glory. To me, and lots of people like me, your slimy scandal and your phony patriotics, to me, Mr. Hunsaker, you're a national disgrace.
Burt Lancaster as the almighty J.J. Hunsaker. Tony Curtis as his man of all dirty work. Introducing Susan Harrison and the Chico Hamilton Quintet.
Look, I can explain.
Why you put your hands on my sister.
I didn't do anything!
The pod bay doors are open. Welcome once again. I'm your host, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverThinkingOscars.com. I got a lot. Here with my intrepid co-host, the film critic for TalkMovieTV.com, the one and only Mr. Doug Heller. How are you today, sir?
Boy, I'd hate to take a bite out of you. You're like a cookie filled with arsenic.
Maybe I left my sense of humor in my other suit. We are talking today about one of the most acid-based films I've ever seen. It is Alexander Mackendrick, 1957, The Sweet Smell of Success.
This is the most cynical movie not directed by Billy Wilder in the 50s.
It is. And we're going to talk about why this movie. I love this film. This is my selection, by the way.
I adore this movie, though, too. I'm glad you picked it, because we would have eventually gotten around to it, but I'm glad we're getting to it so soon.
Oh, yeah. This movie, the best way I ever describe it to anybody is, you could put this movie has the warmth and comfort of a bottle of acid. You could put this movie parallel to a National Geographic documentary about African lions. The people in this movie, this is about a gossip columnist who basically knows how to jerk everybody around. He's played by Burt Lancaster. A wonderful performance.
Mm-hmm.
And
one of his best.
It's one of those movies where every character, you just feel like you're in a barrel of snakes. There's not a nice thing done in this movie.
This is the kind of movie This is the kind of movie that you don't want to put next to any baking soda or any chemical bases, because it'll either explode or just start just destroying everything.
Oh my God, or you light a fuse. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
we should explain ourselves. This movie, 1957. It's very, very film noir.
Yes.
Directed by Alexander Mackendrick.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mackendrick. Yeah, he. The director came from working in England for Ealing Studios.
But born in Boston.
Born in Boston. And when Ealing Studios was sold off, he was facing unemployment. So he started taking offers from Hollywood. And this was the movie that he selected. This was the movie that he took over. And you can tell, because it's very un-Hollywood
Mm-hmm.
in its structure and in its content. Because if you don't know, in England at this time, this was in the mid to late 50s, they had a way of tackling subjects head-on that Hollywood did not because of the production code.
Right, right. We're a few years out from the Angry Young Man films, but this was they really did a lot of socially conscious things, and I like to credit that with a lot with Noel Coward.
Yeah.
Because he didn't shy away from a lot of stuff, and he was the biggest playwright and one of the biggest movie makers. But yeah, this is very much, like you said, very much outside the realm of Hollywood normity. I mean, there's so much outside, like they actually talk about suicide.
Yeah.
There's not at all veiled sexual innuendo. There's prostitution, just any kind of premarital sex. There's sort of a little bit of incestuous insinuation, a little bit. It's kind of on Scarface level. Like,
well, let's get into the story, because basically what this is, it takes place in New York, the Broadway district, Tin Pan Alley, and it mostly deals with a press agent named Sidney Falco, played in, I think, his best performance by.
I was going to say that. Yeah, this is Tony Curtis's best performance.
This and Some Like It Hot are his best work.
Yeah, yeah.
But he plays a press agent. It's named Sidney Falco, and the guy is a worm.
Oh yeah.
He's a columnist. But the problem is that in order to get anything published, he has to go through this very well-regarded Broadway gossip columnist named J.J. Hunsaker, who is basically, how do I describe this? He has a way of making and breaking the lives and careers of those around him just by the force of his mood.
Yeah, he is incredibly powerful.
He's based on Walter White.
Right. He's very powerful, and he knows he's powerful, and he exploits that power.
And he can pull the strings just with words.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, this movie is all about words.
Yeah.
The screenplay was written by Clifford Odets.
And Ernest Lehman.
And Ernest Lehman. And the dialogue is what works here.
Yeah.
It's a dance of words. But anyway, the story is that Sidney wants his pieces in the newspaper, wants in the column. But the problem is that Hunsaker won't do that, because Hunsaker's sister, Susan, has begun a relationship with a jazz guitar player in Dallas. And Sidney has yet to break up that relationship. So in doing so, Hunsaker is basically holding Sidney's career hostage.
Right, and it's bleeding him dry, and all because he just doesn't like this guitar player.
No real reason. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, no reason at all. Just that his sister is, he says, all he has in the world, and he wants to protect her, which is very much shades of 1932's Scarface, which doesn't quite, it doesn't do the stuff that the terrible 83 version does, but it's very, he's obsessed with his sister and he wants to make sure she's safe, and you know, it's a little bit creepy, but on the other hand, he comes off more as a father figure than as a he wants her all to himself kind of thing.
Or maybe wants to decide who she spends her time with.
Right. He's very controlling, so he wants to control every aspect of her life as well as every other person's life.
There's nothing from Dallas that would feed any of his ambitions.
Mm-mm.
It may be, he wants it to be arranged in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And but the funny thing is, we don't meet Hunsaker until 20 minutes into the movie.
I know, but he's all anybody talks about throughout the whole movie.
Right.
Like, he is the story. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you don't even get to see him, and the way he's introduced.
Oh my God. Sidney goes to this restaurant that he basically has a regular food man. And he's failed to break up the relationship. So Sidney goes and he calls him from a payphone inside the restaurant.
Yeah.
And he's basically groveling.
Yeah, and Hunsaker has a telephone at the table.
Right.
Like
and a senator.
Yeah, a senator and a press agent and an attractive blonde. This sets up my favorite shot. The movie was photographed by James Wong Howe, one of the greatest photographers in the history of motion pictures. He was just, his eyes should be in the Smithsonian. Like, he absolutely gorgeous, and the movement that it's set up in a standard two shot. Like, you see Hunsaker, and back and to his right, Sidney, kind of sitting at the table but away from the table, like kind of in exile. And then it cuts over.
And we should also mention here, Hunsaker is played by Burt Lancaster.
Yes,
who was a large man anyway.
Yeah.
And he has large shoulders. So he has a way of just dwarfing Tony Curtis.
Yeah.
He's behind him and to the right.
And Tony Curtis was a slender, lithe man, and he in his heyday. And then it cuts over to this older press agent, attractive blonde, and senator, kind of lined up in distance away from, like, the senator's in the foreground, then the girl is in the midground, and the press agent's in the background. Like, they're in a line, but they're supposed to be sitting next to each other. And at one point, Hunsaker says, "Look, we know why the press agent's here. He's a third wheel. This one is toting this one," and the camera shoots the press agent and then turns, like it's turning its head to the girl, "For you," turns to the senator. When I saw this for the first time, I immediately had to look up who shot the movie. And then I started going into James Wong Howe's prolific filmography.
We were reading off his filmography right before we went on mic. He won 2 Oscars. One for Rose Tattoo. He won a second for HUD, the Paul Newman picture.
Which
Heart
is
of
a
the
great movie
Hunter,
anyway.
and
Yeah.
Yankee Doodle Dandy, and Mr. Blandingfield's Dream House.
The
All
Thin
these great.
Man.
Thin Man,
Uh,
yeah. The Lon Chaney film Last Final Laugh.
yeah. It's
And I mean, his work was just amazing.
he worked from, what was it, 1923.
Till 1975.
Yeah, 1923 to 1975. It's just I can't that is a career right there,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen.
And he
That
died
that is
like a year after his last film, which was Funny Lady.
right.
But yeah, you're right. The organization of shots, placement and movement of characters, and the lighting in this film, you feel like you're in this den of iniquity.
Right, you're just it's so, like, when you're watching it, by the end of it you feel like you need a shower.
Yeah, yeah. The
It's
light
like
in
all
this scene,
seedy and
the light in this scene comes from above,
yeah.
so you're looking down on them, so you feel like you're in some kind of hellscape. These terrible, awful. Like I said, everybody in this movie, they're a barrel of snakes.
Right,
There's not
and
a nice, decent thing done anywhere, any at all in this movie.
no, and Hunsucker's usually always shot from a low angle to make him look even bigger. Until near the end, where they finally start shooting him kind of on level, which kind of diminishes his character as he's losing his ground with his sister, which is amazing visual cues. And that final shot when Susan's walking off, that shot at a low angle to give her more size, because
Yeah.
she's just demonstrated her independence away from her brother.
Right.
And it's so gorgeous. Just, and that last shot, no Hollywood film that was done by Americans would have had that final shot.
It's very British.
Yeah.
It's very British at the time.
Well, it's like the end shot of it's like the end of The Third Man, or
Yeah.
even, although obviously done by an American, the end shot of Touch of Evil.
Yeah.
Just walking off, just going. It's gorgeous. The whole, just powerhouse performances from stars and from unknowns. Wasn't the woman that played Susan Hunsucker, Susan Harrison, this was her first film, if I'm not too much mistaken.
It was. It was. And she's so
and
young.
She
Can't be.
is.
She's got to be in her 20s.
Yeah, and she holds her own expertly against these two powerhouse performers, Tony Curtis and Burt Lancaster. Yeah,
Especially
she
Burt
was.
Lancaster.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because
She was.
He's just this man who, like I said, he's based on Walter Winchell.
Uh-huh.
And just this man who, he holds the puppet strings.
Yeah.
And he twists and turns the lives of those around him just with words.
Mm-hmm.
There is a line, again, the dialogue, we got to get into the dialogue here, because it says, with a simple flick of a switch, I could shut up, what is it? With a simple flick of a switch, I could shut out the greedy murmur of little men.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
And then, you know, Tony Curtis comes in, he sits behind him, he says, "Match me, Sidney."
Yeah.
Oh, it's
man.
so great. You know what I thought of when I heard this dialogue? The movie takes place in New York
Mm-hmm.
when the Greenwich Village thing is beginning to happen, or when it's in its full, the counterculture, the beatnik.
Yeah.
The dialogue is very, very beatnik. It seems to come very much from that culture.
Yeah.
Because it's not, they're not talking like you and I do.
No.
They talk in these colloquialisms. They talk in these weird, Sydney is a line, the cat's out of the bag and the bag's in the river.
Yeah.
Who talks like that?
Hunsucker, you're dead, son. Get yourself buried. I mean,
Yeah.
like.
It's like we have to call the game on the count of darkness. You know?
Right.
Who talks like that?
I don't relish shooting a mosquito with an elephant gun, so why don't you shuffle along?
This is a movie that is fun to listen to.
Yeah,
You know,
it
a cookie
really
full of
is.
arsenic, Sydney. I'd hate to take a bite out of it. You
Yeah.
know.
Watch me run a 50-yard dash with my legs cut off. I mean, this is
Yeah.
just. I mean, and you kind of feel like that's where Ernest Lehman probably came
Yeah.
in a strong, because he was also responsible for uh, he co-wrote Sabrina with Billy Wilder. He wrote The King and I. He wrote North by Northwest, West Side Story, Sound of Music, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Family Plot. I mean, his just verbal,
Dan.
yeah, is just all over those particular movies. And I
And
mean,
it's
Clifford
it's
Odets
mixed
was not.
with and it's mixed beautifully with Clifford Odets,
Yeah,
who his work, you know, The General Died at Dawn, None with the Lonely Heart,
humoresque.
and he wrote some of the dialogue for Notorious.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a dramatic style that was sort of distinguished by a kind of poetic metaphor.
Right, Clash by
Sort of,
Night, humoresque.
right.
Uh, did you ever see Humoresque?
I did.
That's a
Did.
that's a that's a hard movie. That's
It's a rough. I like movies from this era that aren't. You know, sometimes you watch movies from this era. This was 1957. Sometimes you watch movies from this era and you can feel the production code. I like the movies that you can feel are trying to break away from that.
mm-hmm.
Like anything from Billy Wilder, for example. You know, anything anything like this. Something that's trying to get around that, it's trying to tell its own story without those restrictions. Of course, the restrictions are there, but they're not. You don't feel the movie being strangled. You know, we talked last month. We talked about Frankenstein
Mm-hmm.
and how you could feel the production code, you know, strangling a lot of the life out of the film because there were certain things that were changed, subverted, taken out, you know,
Right.
because of that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel that here.
No.
It's very frank.
Right. This was at a time though. Remember when the production code was starting to lose ground.
Yeah.
The
Next
blacklist was coming apart. Although it wouldn't fully break for another 3 years, it was starting to fall, and their influence was starting to come apart. Like the public was going to see things that were a little bit more risque, and
This movie did not do well.
no, it didn't. It didn't. But they were trying to bring American filmmaking into more of an adult era, because this is all right around. It's during Korea, you know.
Yeah.
We're in another war, less than a decade after the last war.
This would be after Korea and just the start of the war in Vietnam.
Right.
America's involved in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, and I've always seen it as kind of a commentary on show business itself, because the way that Hunsaker is able to jerk Sydney around, you can imagine this is what the Hollywood system was like at the time.
Oh yeah.
When you had these major moguls in the studios, and they were able to just kind of pull and yank on the people around them to do their bidding. And you see a person with power who has this way of just, it takes such a minimal effort to get them to do their will. And really the problem that Hunsaker has is not it's not a big problem.
No.
It's really, and it's not a problem that he himself could not take care of. He just enjoys jerking this press agent around
Mm-hmm.
and punishing him when he can't get the job done.
And you know what? It's probably even more. It's not probably that he doesn't like Steve Dallas. It's that he doesn't like Sidney Falco, and he's like, "We'll do this," even though he knows it's not going to work out.
Yeah, even though he knows it's not a job that Sidney can do.
Right.
Sidney is a worm. We see
Yes.
him. He is not taken seriously at all.
No.
He goes to his office. His office is his apartment.
Right. Yeah, because he like
And he's
opens
got
up his
his-
office and he's got this big double bed in the back, and
It's his bedroom, and his receptionist is sitting in the living room
yeah.
behind a desk.
Uh-huh.
And on his door is a piece of paper with his name written on it.
Yeah.
He's such a lowlife. Nobody can take him seriously, and nobody should.
No, he's
He's a worm.
he is the bottom of the barrel. He is absolutely, and you know, this is the press agent in an age a little bit before the publicist.
Yeah.
The press agent was the precursor to the publicist, and if you watch any contemporary movies about Hollywood, the publicist is not portrayed very well.
Yeah.
At
He has a
all.
line. Sidney has a line. He says, the press agent eats a column's dirt and is expected to call it manna.
Yeah.
And you just see he's vibrating underneath the surface because
Mm-hmm.
he's trying to get this done and it's not happening.
Right, because he wants to be the columnist. He wants to be, or some other higher up station in the world of entertainment that will get him money and prestige and power.
He wants to
And-
be on set.
Right, which is what I loved. There's this one scene where he says he's yelling at JJ and he says, "I wouldn't do that for anything. I wouldn't even do that if you gave me my own column." Kind of like a
Yeah.
he's angry and he kind of means it in the moment, but at the same time it's like a hint, this is how you get me to do what you want
Right.
me to do. Offer me a column. And he's, well, who would write my column while me and Susan are away for 2 months? And
And Hunsaker is a man who is known on Broadway. He's got this column, I think it's called Eyes on Broadway or something like that. You see his newspaper and you see the column and you see his face there,
Mhm.
you know, above the column, above the line type. And you know the influence that he has.
yeah,
And it's like I said, this is basically Walter Winchell, who had that kind of power.
yeah,
But again, is a man who is a lion who enjoys the steak.
yes,
I've got all the pieces of the steak, and you can't have any of it. But I'm going to make you think that you can have it by jerking you around.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. Here's another thing. It's played by Burt Lancaster, and probably his best performance.
I would say so, yeah.
And I love Burt Lancaster to death. He was just he could play all kinds of different roles.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
I would say this, the Manchurian Candidate, and maybe even the Rainmaker are
Yeah.
his. He and of course Elmer Gantry.
now this was originally considered for Frank Sinatra.
Ooh.
And based on the dialogue, I can see that.
Yeah.
And early on, it was suggested for Orson Welles.
Ooh.
But I think that Burt Lancaster just has the right trick for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe Orson Welles, maybe like 10 years previous, could have done it.
Mhm.
But by 1957, he was a different kind of actor.
Yeah.
But and Sinatra, personally, I would cast him as Sidney Falco before I would cast him as J.J. Hunsaker.
Maybe, I don't know. I think he was too young for Hunsaker.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That may be why he didn't get it.
Yeah.
Falco, I've never cared much for Tony Curtis as an actor. He's okay.
He's never really been all that spectacular, but in this and Some Like It Hot, he's absolutely magnetic.
Right. But I've never thought of him much.
Right.
You know, as an actor, but he's all right. But here, I think he's given the right role because
right, exactly, yeah.
You know, he's basically this little toady that's always at Hunsucker. He is not around his ankle; he's under his foot.
He's up his butt, really.
Yeah, yeah. And he does these weird things. There's a scene in the movie that really, you know, he's got this. There's this Rita. Her name. She's a cigarette girl.
Mm-hmm.
Club 21, and he talks her into coming to is it his place?
Yeah.
With I think the light suggestion that he may have sex with her.
It was a little bit more than light because she even said, and it's you know that it's not the first time this has happened because she said, "Do you still keep the key under the mat?"
Yeah.
Like she's been there before. She's gone. He's called her. He's probably given her a booty call, or at least the 1950s equivalent of a booty call.
But there's this other columnist, this rival columnist, Hunsucker, and he wants something from him. So he promises him a night with Rita, and Rita knows nothing about it until she gets.
And then he's like, didn't I meet you somewhere before? And he's trying to name all these places, like Fort Lauderdale. Was it Havana? Was it all these places? Yeah. And then once Sydney leaves, she goes, "It was Fort Lauderdale 2 years ago. Don't tell Sydney about it." Like, they've known each other before.
And the rival. This is really weird if you're a television fan, because the rival columnist is played by David White, who played Larry Tate on Bewitched.
Yeah.
And he looks exactly the same as he
did
on that show.
Yeah.
But it's a really.
But he's just creepy and seedy. It's like watching now I can't remember the name of the movie, but these four bachelors get a bachelor pad to have extramarital trysts, and not Tony Curtis. What's his name? Tony Randall is one of the people, and in his early film career, Tony Randall was always like this cheating, backstabbing little creep of a guy, and then he goes on to play Felix Unger. Like, everybody knows him as Felix Unger. There's this uptight, persnickety guy, and then you watch his early film career, it's like, oh, ew.
In the 60s, he would be in all those Doris Day movies, basically playing a gay best friend, but not being called a gay best friend.
Right, yes.
And, and again, as I said before, there's not a nice thing that anybody does in this movie at all.
No.
I mean, everybody's as crooked as a barrel of snakes.
Except Susan and Steve.
Even Susan, at the end.
That's true.
Because she screws Sydney over.
Yeah, big time.
Pretending to commit suicide and setting him up to look like she's being raped.
Yeah.
But at the end, and it's just,
consider who her brother is. You know, she learned her lessons.
I was thinking that. I was thinking that. Like, you know, the family lines. You know, the fruit the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I mean, it's just. And did you notice also? J.J. Hunsucker has this way with people of talking to them as if he's talking to a misbehaving dog. That's the way he talks to people.
Well, he talks to everybody in kind of a threatening manner, whether he's threatening or not.
Even that senator, right at the beginning. I mean, even that senator, it's like you would expect. I mean, it's a senator, so you're thinking he's going to be at least accommodating. No, he's not accommodating at all.
no,
He
because
basically,
he has dirt on him, so he
right.
doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to kowtow to the powerful because he has power over the powerful.
The only person that but when he's with Susan, the personality completely changes. The tactics
Yeah.
don't change. The
No.
tactics don't change, but the personality changes. Almost paternal,
Mm-hmm.
you might say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It becomes um, almost like her father.
Right. And you know, like I when we were talking about her before, we were like, she's got to be in her early 20s. She was 19 when this movie came out.
Yeah.
So, but Burt Lancaster was how old? Had to be in his like late 30s, early 40s.
This was in '57. He was born in 1911.
Okay, well then, yeah, he was 46.
Yeah, he's in his 40s. Yeah, he's about my age. That's weird. But
don't
it,
don't do that to yourself because then
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because
But I
this
mean,
movie gets a little personal.
yeah.
Because you and I are trying to build careers as critics and columnists.
Exactly.
So this movie
We
feels
do
like
we do feel a little bit like Sydney from time to time. It's just like, why won't you take my stuff?
and you feel like you're watching The Nightmare World from It's Wonderful Life, and it's like this is the nightmare world that you would live in.
Right, exactly, exactly. This is what we're trying to be a part of. It's
Yeah.
like,
But we're
really?
trying to get away from
Yeah.
when Sydney has to go out and has to prostitute a girl that he, had I don't know if you call it a romantic interest, but, just at least has she has some affection for him, and he basically prostitutes her. And that's, the character Rita, that's the last time we see her, by the way.
Yeah. And the exchange is Otis says, "I can't think of a good reason why I should print anything you give me. I can't even think of a bad reason." And Sidney says when he's looking at a pinup, he goes, "Suppose I introduce you to a lovely reason who's both good and bad and available." And Otis is like, "I'm not an unreasonable man." Like, ugh, ugh, ugh.
Oh, my God.
Oh, that is just that is one of the grossest things as in an older movie that I can even think of that does not involve some sort of positive representation of slavery.
Right.
Because there's a few of those.
Yeah.
Even in the 50s and early 60s. But it's just lurid and gross and amazing because you don't expect to see anything like that from a film
This time.
1957 and an American film from 1957. If it was European, it wouldn't be shocking.
I was just going to say, it's, again, we talk about the films made in England at the time,
Mm-hmm.
that they don't have this, the English didn't have a lot of hang-ups about it. If they dealt with a subject, they dealt with it head on.
Well, sure. I mean, most European films did that. Like you'd see things like what was it? Was it Pasolini's Mama Roma from the early '60s, who's basically a prostitute who's trying to look after her son, and you get a lot of more adult themes, even stuff from the Far East, very violent and not shy about implying sex, and even in some cases showing nudity, even in the 40s, and swearing a lot.
Listen, we're going to talk about 3 films next week from Truffaut
Mm-hmm.
that were made in the late 50s and early 60s that are very frank.
Yes,
of course,
very much so.
They're French. The French
Yes.
never seem to have these things.
No. The French
but
and the
yeah,
Italians specifically, but
well, I mentioned the English. I keep going back to this, but there's, one of the best examples, one of my favorite films, made only a few years after this, was a Basil Dearden film called Victim.
mm-hmm.
Dirk Bogarde
Excellent
plays
picture.
an English attorney, a British attorney, who's about to be appointed as a barrister.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this information starts bubbling up about his past as a homosexual.
Mm-hmm. And at the time, uh, homosexuality was punishable by jail time
Right.
in the United Kingdom, which I always thought was kind of funny because you're literally going to put somebody in prison where they can have probably easier access to what they're being imprisoned for. Especially if they put them in a lot of places where they have a lot of gay inmates that are jailed because of homosexuality. It's like, what are you trying to do here? Like, what is the purpose here? Where's the end game? What is this?
Well, the movie that movie is very, very frank and very, very upfront.
And it's incredible too.
Where in the United States, if the movie were made in the United States, that would have been sponge cleaned.
Oh, it wouldn't have been made because it was about gay people. Like there was a silent movie. I can't remember who directed it. I want to say maybe Theodore Dreyer. Michael. That was about a gay relationship that I'm pretty sure was not shown over here for a long time. It's they weren't afraid over there, and over here, there's always been this image consciousness in America since the Puritans came over and started stealing the land. We've had these hang-ups over pretty much anything. And just when you think we've grown beyond it, we prove that we haven't.
Right. Right.
And Europe, maybe because it's so the civilization base in Europe and Asia and Africa is so much older that they went through all this a long time ago before the New World had even been discovered by white people. So they had time to root a lot of this out, and by the time they got to the modern age, they didn't have all of these hang-ups and everything. Because if you look, the Holy Roman Empire did a lot of scourging out a lot of the erotic fiction from the Roman Empire, and from a lot like in the library at Alexandria. Like they did a lot of scrubbing to get rid of a lot of that, but that was back in like the 1200s.
Yeah.
Years and years and years before we even showed up. So maybe we're just going through our paces, but we're such a young country that it feels like we're just behind the times.
And we've always been puritanical.
Yes, regrettably.
Particularly in our movies, because the and it's that thing that happens, that weird thing that happens when people start complaining about art.
Yeah.
Art is a personal expression.
Yeah.
And who is anybody else to say that it's not suitable for a mass audience?
I always love it when they say, what's the line between art and pornography? It's like, there really isn't one. It's all how you perceive it. It's like Obi-Wan says, it depends greatly on your own point of view.
My favorite quote, my favorite and strangest quote about pornographic films is, you can distinguish a pornographic film by the fact that you're always aware of how much time is being wasted by people getting in and out of cars. If you're watching pornography, you don't want to see them doing anything but have sex.
Right.
You're aware of how much time is being wasted by a conversation.
Yeah. What was it? In I don't remember what trial it was, but there was a judge ruling on obscenity, and somebody said to him, "Well, what is pornography to you?" He says, "I don't know, but I know it when I see it."
Yeah.
It's like, how is that? Like, that is the single most subjective thing anybody could ever say.
Right. Right.
I can't define it, but I'll tell you when I see it. Like,
I'll tell you when I see it. It's fascinating to me. It's always interesting, and America has always been so backwards on this.
Oh yeah.
Because we go around, we especially in our movies, we can saw people's guts out, chop their heads off, gouge their eyes out, and all of that. But two people in a room having sex, we will chop and cut that footage down until it is nothing.
Until it is gold lit thrusting.
Right, those gold lit thrusting. I mean,
I will never get that image out of my head, for better or for worse.
Sweet November. Sweet November, yeah. And but I'm always fascinated by that because I watch a lot of films from overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever wonder why most critics' 10 best lists list a lot of films you've never heard of, it's because they're films from outside Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
They're different. The content is different. The subject matter is different. They're not genre films. And we stick to genre films like glue.
We do, yeah. Yeah.
And because there's this perception in America, and it may be correct, it may not, that we only want to see what we want to see.
Right.
That American audiences don't want to be challenged.
Yeah, which is, I don't, it's not true, but it is, because if it's all we're presented with, that's all we're going to think there is, so that's all we're going to want to see. It's like when there was this whole big thing going on several years ago, when it was about 2010, and the King's Speech came out, and suddenly it's doing a whole lot of business, and it's just this little drama, and they actually went back so that they could reach a wider audience, because it was rated R because of language. They made a PG-13 version with toned down language so that more people could see it. And that's really one of the bigger problems. Like, it's like, well, PG-13 doesn't have more than one or two uses of the F word, but then you have to concede other words. And it's like all these rules, and well, you know, PG-13, they make everything PG-13 so that they can reach the widest audience possible. And it waters down so much. Oh my gosh. I refuse to watch PG-13 horror movies. I'm not a huge horror fan, as we established in our Shocktober month. But if it's a PG-13 slasher film, what's the point? Because you're not allowed to show blood in a PG-13 movie, and you're not allowed to show sex. You're not allowed to really show much of anything. It's like, what is the point of a horror movie that isn't going to scare you, just so that more people can sit and younger people can go watch it?
Well, and because teenagers go to see a lot of horror films.
Yeah, and how many times were you carded when you went to the movies? When
I was carded once. Only
Me too.
one.
Me too.
One of the Friday the 13th movies, and that's it.
South Park,
but
bigger, longer, and uncut.
A teenager will go and see a PG-13 horror film. Will go and see is the same teenager who will go and see an R-rated horror film.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter.
No.
They're not carded anyway.
No.
The strangest argument that I've ever heard, was when they were starting to show Schindler's List in classrooms.
Yeah, and Saving Private Ryan.
And Saving Private Ryan. Now, those movies are full of violence.
Yes.
And horrible inhumanity. But they start cutting on the films because of the nudity.
Mm-hmm.
Start cutting on Schindler's List because there's nudity in it. I'm thinking, if you can You can sit through a naked body, okay?
I know,
In fact,
and
I'd rather a kid sit through a naked body than something as horrible.
but largely the nudity in Schindler's List, and there will be an episode on Schindler's List.
Yeah.
It's not erotic nudity. It's
No.
terrifying. Most of it is either the physical exams, or going in the gas chamber, or just the bodies piled. It's not sex.
The only time I can ever think in that movie, the only time I can ever think of nudity being outside of that was there's a shot of Schindler getting out of bed.
Oh yeah.
See the woman he's sleeping with. That's the only instance. But I'm just shocked whenever we become so puritanical and we don't shoot it. Now sometimes it works best. Now coming back to Sweet Smell of Success, sometimes it works better in Suggestion.
Right.
Because when Rita has to have sex with this man,
I don't want to see that.
I don't want to see that. There's nothing erotic about this.
No, it's gross.
Unless you're just sick.
Yeah.
There's nothing erotic about this. There's nothing, and to go any further than the movie provide than the information the movie provides, it's not necessary.
No.
It's all in the subject matter.
Yeah, you know what
all
happens.
In the subject matter.
I mean, you don't really need.
You get it.
Yeah. The context is enough.
Right. But the thing is, and this happens with Sweet Smell of Success in every other film. Anybody who goes to see a movie like this knows that things like this exist in the world.
Right.
It's nothing new. So I've never understood cutting and editing and chopping to protect the audience. Protect the audience from what?
Now, see, that's where I was kind of talking about earlier, and the extraordinary image consciousness of powerful figures in the United States. They say that they're trying to protect the audience, when what they're really doing is trying to protect the image of America, to not make it look like there's this stuff going on here, make us look better than the oversexed, over-violenced Europeans or Asians or something. It's
because we want the rest of the world to see us in the light of Singing in the Rain, Resident Sweet Smell of Success.
Exactly. And that's why the things at the New Hollywood movement in the late 60s and into the 70s were so shocking, because suddenly there's sex and there's violence and there's blood and there's death on screen and there's swearing of every kind of imaginative.
Basically, there's Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, there's Bonnie and Clyde. There's Mean Streets. There's Easy
The
Rider. There's The Godfather. You know, it took on a more European standpoint, and people were, things are getting so much worse because they're having all this stuff in the movies. It's like, well, you have it in life. Why wouldn't it be in the movies? Like,
art imitates life, and it should imitate life.
Teen pregnancy did not originate in the late 60s with the Flower Child movement. It's like...
There was a Bonnie and Clyde in real life.
Yeah.
You know, people knew about this. This was not news.
Yeah.
Anybody in the late 60s. You know, so when anybody started complaining that this was too violent, well, guess what? In life, it was too violent.
It was terrible.
People like J.J. Hunsaker existed in the world.
And that's what
It's
people
called
didn't
Walter
want. Yeah, they didn't want to think about that.
It still exists.
Yeah.
Men like this still exist today.
Mm-hmm.
They're falling like dominoes right now. Men like Harvey Weinstein.
Yay!
You know, they're falling like dominoes.
Take them out, man. Take them out.
Because of their appetites.
Yeah.
You know, because of what they do. You know, silence the murmur of greedy little men.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, people like this. And what got people really hot about this film, and the reason that it didn't do well, is because this heel, this person who destroys the murmur of greedy little men is not punished.
No, not
This
even
movie
in the
ends.
slightest.
This movie ends with a police detective beating the crap out of Sidney,
Yeah,
and JJ just walking away.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you could say that he's kind of punished because Susan walks out of his life. But I mean, where's she going? Because
Yeah.
didn't they kill the guitar player?
Did
He's
they?
in a hospital or something. Like
Yeah, he was in a hospital.
that kind of loses me a little bit because they don't show it, but they talk about it. Like he's in the hospital and he's like clinging to life, and they won't let her see him. And we don't ever really know if he survives that or not. So like, where's she walking off to? Who's she walking off to? Like,
Because I mean, he's got this. Hunsaker's got this police detective, Kello,
mm-hmm.
who basically was based on a New York police detective named Eddie Egan, who was the basis for Popeye Doyle.
Right. Yeah.
And he's not. He's corrupt, but only to the degree that he's not. Well, should I call him corrupt?
Yeah, no,
he's
I mean,
doing Hunsaker's bidding just like everybody else.
Right, he takes money to do things that are outside the purview of his job as a law enforcement officer while
Like
he's on duty. That's corruption. That's
like
he's not right. He's not taking money to help the drug trade or taking money from pimps, but he's still and there's plenty of off-duty police officers that have second jobs as security, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody's got to eat and live, but when you're doing it, when you're representing the police force in uniform, called in, right, and you're doing someone else's dirty work. You're the muscle for somebody else. That is besmirching the police department that you're working for, and then yes, you are corrupt. Sorry, guys.
This is a great example of noir.
Mm-hmm.
It has a very European influence, and it sticks to the cardinal rule. It sticks to one of the cardinal rules of the genre, which is it does not have a happy ending.
No, and it's also it's singular perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's all from Sidney's perspective.
Yeah.
All of it.
Well, except for there is a conversation between JJ and Susan.
Right. That's the only time it breaks away.
Right. When he's trying to talk her out of going out with this, I think isn't she engaged to him?
That as of that night, that's something else I wanted to talk about. Yeah, as of that night, she accepted his proposal. She said, "I'll try to be the best wife to you that I can." It's incredible to me that this movie takes place over the course of about 24 hours.
Yeah.
From very, very early in the morning on, I want to say a Saturday, all the way through, and Sidney doesn't sleep.
No.
It's like you get this feeling that he's been on this trail for days, but this is like this long stretch that he's like up at 3-4 o'clock in the morning to see the early edition of the newspaper before anybody else. He's already getting calls in his office.
And then he goes home and changes shoes. I mean,
he changes pants. I don't even think he changed his shirt. He unbuttons it, but I don't think he ever actually takes it off. But he changes his pants, he changes his shoes, and maybe his jacket. But it's cold in New York, but he doesn't bring an overcoat because he doesn't want to waste money tipping coat check girls all over the city because he knows he's going to be running all over the place. So in an effort to save money he doesn't have, he doesn't even take a coat and a hat, and he's running around. It's and you can tell it's like early winter, late fall, early winter, and he would be old.
Yeah, and and you get the sense that when you're watching him run around town, going here, there, and over, it's basically Hunsecker's got the mouse in a maze,
Yeah.
chasing a piece of cheese,
Mm-hmm.
or chasing the idea of a piece of cheese.
Yeah.
It's like down and running around the maze, and there's no cheese at the end. It just goes around in circles,
Mm-hmm.
and that's essentially where Sydney is.
Yeah.
And in the end, you get the feeling that he gets beaten up, and you get the feeling that his circumstances have not changed.
Not
At
even
all.
a bit. Not even a bit. And you know that
Actually, they got worse.
yeah, yeah. But by Monday, he's going to be trying to do the same thing with JJ. Get stuff into his column and stuff. It's like, and he'll be in a more difficult position, but you get the he's just going to go back to the hustle. You know, as soon as he can, as soon as he's healed, he's going to go right back into the hustle. And because, he says he wants more than what he's got, but you don't sense that he's really going for more. You sense that he's just trying to be the best at what he does, and that's it. Like,
The bottom feeder.
absolutely.
Such
Absolutely.
a bottom feeder.
Yeah.
And like I said, just such a little mouse, just running around, and it's kind of really it's directionless.
Yeah.
It's like, here, go here, go here, go in this
Mm-hmm.
direction,
Mm-hmm.
here, go in this direction. And he's just running around in circles going nowhere.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, he's so willing to do anything to get there. I felt nothing for him.
No,
I'm
you're not
not
supposed to. He's the only person you're supposed to kind of feel bad for is Susan and Steve.
Yeah. They
But
do have a sweet relationship.
They do. They're sweet kids. Steve's a talented guitar player, and
Steve was played by Martin Milner. I think this was before Route 66.
I think
and
so.
Years before Adam 12.
Right.
And he had a big TV career.
Mm-hmm.
He's such a golden boy. He's such a
He's just
pretty boy.
It's like they went to the factory for blonde-haired people.
They went to the Aryan factory.
They waited for the mold to be pressed. They waited for him to cool, and then they took him out of the factory and put him in these movies and these shows. It's like he is just absolutely in the mold model. Just
the white Aryan perfection. I mean,
I know.
golden hair and just good looking. He's that kind of a Robert Redford type. Just and he's in a career that most people at the time would have not have thought to be, very profitable or very reputable. He's a jazz guitarist,
right.
Greenwich Village, the beats, the counterculture, what have you. Before it really was, I think it was before it really was the counterculture.
It was before the counterculture, but it was definitely. That's something that I admire about this, because there were movies made from about 1955 to about 1968 that made fun of beatniks, even after beatniks were pretty much gone.
I make fun of beatniks.
But this one doesn't go after the culture. It just goes after reputation. And you don't see the people in the black leotards and the berets and the goatees snapping their fingers, dancing around and stuff. Yeah.
The beat poetry, I love the beat poetry. I once met a blind man. He was out of sight.
See, and that's the mockery of it. Like, but when you I confess
I get
that
the purpose behind it, but it's kind of ridiculous to look back at.
I mean, I kind of had my we'll call it my literary awakening when I read Kerouac's On the Road.
Yeah.
So I got deep into Kerouac and Ginsberg and Burroughs, which Naked Lunch is a heck of a read. But, you know, and I got really caught up in their stuff because it was less formal and less and more real than a lot of the package stuff that was going on at the time. And they were rebelling against not really having an identity. And
Well, and rebelling against the conformity of an American culture that had become so commercial that it
right,
became plastic. The
right.
man goes to work, the woman stays home.
Uh-huh.
You know, there's that place for everybody, and they were rejecting that.
Yeah, and
The forerunners of the hippie movement.
right, right. They were definitely the precursors of the hippie movement. And that's why they get mocked so viciously by the establishment. It's like, look at these goofy kids
Yeah.
snapping their fingers and going, "Hey, I dig it, baby, crazy, man." And sure, there were people like that, but I mean, by the time you get to, what was it, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with the delivery guy
Yeah.
that's dancing and coming out like all his they're almost like they're trying to attack hippies by attacking beatniks 10 years too late.
Right.
It's like
Right.
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 It's like, and there's all sorts of stuff. What was it? Daddy Longlegs with Fred Astaire and Audrey Hepburn had the same mocking tone, and that was in the mid '60s too. It's like these people are gone. Why are you still making fun of them like they're around?
Or our.
They weren't even keeping up with the times to mock the people who weren't conforming to them.
Yeah, or the basic idea that anybody had about beatniks and hippies. Maynard G. Krebs,
Yeah, yep,
the Bob
yep,
Denton
yep,
character from Toby
yep,
Gillis. I mean,
yep,
that was people's most people's
absolutely,
perception of that.
yep. With the
Yeah,
crumb catcher.
basically Shaggy,
Yeah.
Goofy Doo, and that was the culture, and that was. And when you look at this film, I was watching this the other night, trying to figure out what is JJ's objection to this guy.
He actually even
And
says he doesn't have one. He just doesn't like
have
it.
one. But I kept thinking, does he really have an objection to this guy? No, he doesn't
No.
have an objection to this guy.
He doesn't. He
Other than
just
the
thinks
fact
he's
that
not good enough for his sister.
or any man would be.
Right. Exactly.
Because
That's
Dallas
the catch.
does not have any string to JJ's interest
No.
at
no.
all.
That's
think
what
that's
I think
the
he's.
objection.
He says that at one point. He's like, he can't do anything for me.
Right.
So I don't really want him to be my brother-in-law. That's why he wants to. He's basically, he says that his sister is all he has in the world and all he cares about. But
Well,
when
yeah,
you
'cause
really
he
think
screwed
of,
everything else.
well,
I
I
mean-
mean, and other people say, all it is. I think it was Sydney that says all you have is your column. That's it. That's all you think of. So when he's saying that she's all he has in the world and all this stuff, I think what he's really saying is she is his last untapped piece of property that he can broker. Because if he can get her married to somebody who is powerful in the profession and can get the scoops that he needs without having to rely on people like Sydney, then those are the people that are going to be good enough for her.
Right.
Because he can use whomever she goes with for his own ends, basically pimping her out to make him more powerful. And that's the whole thing. It's like he doesn't care about her. He cares about what she can do for him as a result of his, how she can further his career by getting married to the right person.
Right.
Which is also super gross.
Manipulating the relationship that she would have with someone who is fueling his interests, so that he can have more of a hold on whatever it is he's trying to.
And he doesn't need any more. He
No.
has. He even has his own television show.
Yeah.
He has
Yeah.
a daily column and his own television show. In
It's
1957, that is
where,
the height of influence.
yeah, he's like he doesn't want. Uh, he just he wants to see what he can acquire.
Right, he wants more. They're like, well, that old saying is like, well, if you want more, how much is going to be enough? And the answer is, there's never enough.
There's never enough.
For people like him. He's the alcoholic, or he's the addict in the movie, but he's addicted to fame and power, and he just
By the
wants
way,
more and more and more.
If you ever want a double bill with this film, The Player.
Oh yeah.
It's a great double bill with this.
Yeah, Robert Altman's
another
92.
film about Robert Altman, 1992. I mean, a guy who is works in a studio. He gets in an argument with his screenwriter, ends up killing him, and the movie is basically how he gets away with it.
Yeah. Oh, it's a beautiful movie that it sometimes takes a couple of times for that one, because when I first saw that, I was like, yeah, it's good, it's fine, it's and then I watched it again and I'm like, oh, yeah, no, this is brilliant.
It's actually more timely now than it was back then.
It is, I know, yeah.
But again, if you want a double bill, with this, that's a movie to watch.
Yeah, yeah, that's...
Or,
yeah.
as I said at the top of this show, any National Geographic documentary about African lions. Because you're watching, basically, in this film, the human animal. The instinct for power and getting ahead and knocking down anything that...
For the kids, this relationship between Hunsucker and the press agents is like Scar and the hyenas in Lion King.
Pretty much.
He is Scar, and they are the hyenas.
So you can see that there's a through line here.
Yeah.
In film history, I mean, I could point out a dozen films like this.
Yeah.
But this movie is special because it is so bleak.
Yeah.
So cold and so. But
unrelenting.
So endlessly fascinating.
Yeah.
And the dialogue, like I said, we could quote this movie all day. Because the dialogue by Cliff Odets and
Ernest Lehman
is so fascinating because it's this dance of words.
Yeah.
It's very hip. It's very, almost very Greenwich Village, very beatnik. And it twists and turns, and there's these phrases. Again, we talked about who talks like that.
Yeah.
I just love, I just love hearing these people talk.
I know. It almost doesn't matter what the story is. You're going to listen to it and love it regardless.
Right. Right.
Yeah, there's not much more I can really say about this. What would your recommendations be?
Well, I have two. One, and they're basically because of the creative influences. The director, Alexander Mackendrick. I want to recommend the film that he made in England 2 years earlier called The Lady Killers.
Good, really great movie.
It's an Alec Guinness comedy in which they're trying to steal money from an old lady. This is Wilberforce. And everything that can go wrong goes wrong.
And Alec Guinness's teeth. Oh my god.
Oh my god, he has these terrible buck teeth.
And I'll say watch the Mackendrick, not the Coen Brothers version.
Oh please, yes. Ooh. That's one of the few.
That's like the worst Coen Brothers movie. Like.
That's one of the few Coen Brothers films that just. Ugh.
It's wrong. It's wrong-headed, and it took the wrong approach. But
right.
Anyway, what's your other recommendation?
My other recommendation is a film photographed by James Wong Howe in the late '60s called Seconds.
Oh, brilliant picture. Frankenheimer.
Frankenheimer. It's about a man who goes through an experiment to become someone else, and he realizes that he was really better off just being the man that he was.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of humanity. I was reminded of a movie called Gattaca.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. It is a great movie. What do you got?
Yeah. Well, I have, just kind of piggybacking off of what you had said, I also want to recommend one of Alexander Mackendrick's British directed Alec Guinness starring pictures called The Man in the White Suit.
I have not.
Oh God, this one I was given a copy of this by my saxophone teacher, a private lesson teacher who had been the band director, the middle school band director for my school. He retired, but he was this huge movie buff. He gave me my first Kurosawa. He gave me my first Bergman, and he gave me a copy of this. The Man in the White Suit. Alec Guinness invents a fabric that cannot stain, and is indestructible. So it's basically you buy one suit and you don't ever have to buy another piece of clothing.
Oh God.
It's like and the garment industry is trying to shut it down and eliminate it because it would run them out of business. So it's this great there's a lot of cool editing tricks and stuff like that that really reinforces the cleverness of this kind of material and everything. So I highly recommend that.
I'll just say this about if you watch anything that Alec Guinness did in Ealing Studios or early in his career, it makes you feel bad that the only thing he's known for by this generation is the Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Star Wars.
Because for Star Wars is because he was such a wonderful actor. And he could do so much more than just Star Wars.
I love Star Wars. We talked about this when we did The Last Jedi, and it's one of the key points in both of our lives. But when then you go back and you see him in Bridge on the River Kwai, or Kind Hearts and Coronets, and The Horse's Mouth,
great.
which he adapted as a writer as well, and
Lady Killers, Kind Hearts, Coronets, any of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, even if you can look past the fact that he's a white man dressed as an Arab prince in Lawrence of Arabia, he's very good in that too, despite the fact that it's brown face. It's unfortunate. So and kind of going from that, the James Wong Howe movie that I would say that, I mean, anything he did looks spectacular.
Except Funny Lady, because that movie is terrible. Not because of him, it's just that movie is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I would personally recommend. Now, we mentioned The Thin Man earlier, which is it's a great movie, and people probably know that pretty well.
We can do an episode on that because I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a great book too. I would recommend The Prisoner of Zenda from 1937. One of the many times that this movie was made, this story was turned into a film. I think there's at least 6 versions of it from silent era up until like the 50s or 60s. But the 37 version, directed by John Cromwell and W.S. Van Dyke. W.S. Van Dyke also directed The Thin Man from 1937. This is a great movie.
I gotta tell you a little story. I ran into the only reason I ever saw The Thin Man for the first time is because of the television listing. I misread it and thought it was The Third Man. So I recorded it and it came on and I was like, oh, I don't have anything to do, so I'll watch it. And I loved it.
It's brilliant.
It's the Nick and Nora Charles. It's the first Nick and Nora Charles film.
Yeah, the one that's actually based on the book.
Yeah.
By Dashiell Hammett.
By Dashiell Hammett.
My favorite writer. But
next week
is
your birthday.
Yes.
And in honor of that, we are jumping across the pond, and we are going to talk about 3 films from the gone too soon, legendary Francois Truffaut.
Yes. Whose birthday I share.
Yeah.
And it was better than going over King's Row or something that Zsa Zsa Gabor was in, because I share a birthday with Ronald Reagan and Zsa Zsa too.
I share a birthday with Joseph McCarthy.
Hey!
I got nothing. So we're going to talk about, this is going to be what we call Three from Truffaut Volume 1, because we're going to eventually, throughout the course of time, go over his entire filmography.
Which
and
is
here
going
we're
to
going
be
to start with
dazzling.
the first three.
Mm-hmm.
The 400 Blows, the very different Shoot the Piano Player,
Yeah.
and then the very dark melodrama, Jules and Kim.
Which is also oddly funny. It's in parts.
So
It's dark. It's dark.
it's one of those. It's great, but you got to go walk around in the yard afterwards just to kind of.
Oh sure, judge a movie by the end.
Not the end, the second half. It's a lot like Sweet Smell of Success. It's not pulling any punches. And when it's over, it does not. It just has a life goes on in it.
When it is over, it is over.
It is over. It's done. And nobody wins.
So anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about next week. Happy birthday to me! And these, though, I should mention that this was the first time that that Jerry, you had seen any of these three pictures.
Right. I found out. I went through his filmography and found out I've actually seen two of his films. I've seen The Story of Adlai H.
Mm-hmm.
And Fahrenheit 451, which I didn't realize was a Truffaut film.
Ah, yes, it's his only English language film.
Right.
With Julie Christie and Oscar Werner, which is it's a really good movie.
It's been an age and a decade since I've seen it, but it's really good.
Yeah, so that's what we have coming up next week. We thank you very much for tuning in. Like I said, every time I finish one of these episodes, I feel like I'm in Yankee Doodle Dandy. And my mother thanks you, my father thanks you, my sister thanks you, and I thank you.
Because why not?
Yeah.
Why not quote Cagney? You know?
So on behalf of my co-host Jerry Dean Roberts, where you can find his writings at armchaircinema.com, armchairoscars.com, and overthinkingoscars.wordpress.com, and on Twitter at armchaircma. You can find my writings on talkmovietome.com. I'm Doug Heller, film critic and film historian for that site, and you can find me on Twitter at talkmovietome1. So thank you very much for tuning in, and the pod bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.